Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast from Los Angeles. I have Brian Williams, and he is attorney representing those who have been wronged in a variety of different situations, either sexual assault, sports hazing, wrongfully terminated, workplace discrimination. He's also a lawyer that runs a highly successful business, different from most law firms. So we're going to hear about the business aspect. And so if you're a guest interested in legal advocacy for survivors, Brian's your man, and I'm really happy to have him on and pick his brain. So, Brian, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, briefly introduce yourself and describe your experience and your expertise, and I'm excited to dive into the topics.
Great. Yeah, appreciate it. Like you said, I am a lawyer. I am the managing partner of the law firm called Greenberg Gross. We operate four different offices, 3 states. We specialize in a variety of different cases, but fundamentally, we're trial lawyers and we represent individuals who are harmed in some fashion. Typically, most of our cases involve survivor, like you said, children who have been sexually abused as kids, and we sue institutions that allow or enable that to happen, so that hopefully it doesn't happen in the future. We represent a lot of employees who suffer some type of illegal activity in the context of their employment. We sue people who get harmed in nursing homes, a variety of different environments. And again, we operate in multiple states and are happy to help those in need.
Yeah, we'll dive into the questions. The first question I have for you is majority of in these cases when clients mostly come to you, how do you evaluate it? Is it like if you have a case and then or talk about your process of client intake?
Sure, sure. We have intake specialists. They're located in multiple different areas, but they're typically the initial point of contact from a potential client calling our firm. That intake person's primary job is to see if we can actually assist the individual client. We get calls for types of law that we don't handle. So, for example, if someone calls and says, "Hey, I have an immigration problem," that's not what we do. We will try our best to point him or her in the right direction of a different firm to call. If someone is calling in to talk about an area of the law that we do practice, there is very much a screening process to see whether the case has merit and is one that we want to pursue on behalf of that client. What I tell people all the time is the hardest thing I do as a lawyer is actually telling people no, because I want to help everybody, but it would be impossible, and there's not enough of me to help everybody. So we do screen cases, and fundamentally, my criteria is if I can help that client achieve a result that makes their life better, I'll take their case. If I think I cannot help that client achieve a result that helps their life, then I won't. And that's the basics of it. And again, once you're signed on, then you're passed along to actual lawyers and paralegals and stuff to handle your individual case.
Yeah. And a lot of the audience are there. I think the issue of employment law is quite interesting. And we'll dive into some of the questions around. So, how do you see what are some of the most common unlawful employment practices and how can employees protect their rights?
So there's certainly categories that I see more often than not. I see a lot of people I call whistleblower claims, meaning an employee comes to their employer or perhaps a government agency, OSHA, or a safety organization, and says, "Hey, my employer is doing something wrong that is, for example, engendering the safety of other employees." And in response to blowing that whistle, the employer gets mad and says, "How dare you question our safety practices? You're fired." You know, that's a very simplistic example of how this works, but you can't do that. Employees should speak out when something illegal or unsafe is occurring within the workplace, and they can't be punished or demoted or some adverse action taken against them because they just exercise their rights to try to help people. I see, unfortunately, a lot of discrimination cases, variety of protected classes out there. So race discrimination, gender discrimination, disability discrimination, age, those types of cases. All employees have rights, and they have a right to not be discriminated against or mistreated at work simply because they are getting older or they are pregnant or they are disabled in some respect. So those are the big ones. There's a lot of litigation, particularly in California, on wage and hour disputes. Is an employer paying the proper wages, enough overtime? Are they giving the right meal and rest breaks? I don't do those cases myself, but that's another huge category, and there's plenty of firms out there that handle those wage theft cases, is a term often used.
Yeah. The next question I have for you is with remote work, and how do you see employee rights evolving with the rise of remote hybrid work trends? You also have some, I think you call them like gig economy workers. How do you see their rights evolving?
Yes, whether you're working in the office or remote, you have the same legal protections. I think, in my opinion, and I know this is different across industries, but I think remote work is here to stay. We have remote programs in our firm where individuals can have we work like a hybrid schedule. They can work 3 days in the office and 2 days from their home. And some I know law firms that are fully remote. Every single person that they employ is remote. And I know law firms that require everybody to come into office. All of those are still perfectly acceptable options. You just have to implement your policies fairly and evenly across the board. If you favor one type of employee in terms of the types of hybrid options you provide and you don't give those same options to different types of employee, then you could run into problems. Obviously, there's business needs and there's different roles or titles within the firm that might change that. I don't think hybrid's going away. I think firm businesses, but for my sake, law firms can operate just as efficiently and as well with hybrid or full remote employees.
Mm.
And frankly, it opens up a lot of opportunities for businesses. I have remote workers in other countries, and I couldn't have that. I couldn't have them as people that help us on our cases if I required everybody to come in the office. So I view it as an advantage. But again, I know it's not for everybody. It's fine.
Yeah. Following up is because you are representing the individual as opposed to most people representing the business or the corporation. And how, in your opinion or your experience, how do institutions typically handle lawsuits, and how can plaintiffs navigate these cases effectively?
Great question. I think it varies based on the industry and it varies based on the company involved. No employer wants to get sued by their employee for some type of wrong, but it happens and it's commonplace and it's not going away because unfortunately mistreatment in the workplace occurs. I think some institutions, particularly those that are more developed or savvy, will realize early on whether a case that's filed against them is good or not. And if there's a case that has merit, then those entities are smart enough to try to resolve it early. If you have a case against you as a corporation where you realized, hey, we did make a mistake as we treated that employer, the worst thing you can do is litigate it for the next 2 or 3 years and incur hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees paying someone by the hour to defend you, right? I think savvy or practical firms or corporations realize when they've made a mistake and try to resolve it. Others, particularly really large corporations, feel like I can't pay employee A even if I made a mistake because then every one of my other 5,000 employees will realize, hey, I could do that. And so they worry about precedent and whatnot. Those are business decisions that all those institutions have to make. My job is to make sure that if an employee was wronged or treated illegally, that they have rights and I provide them a voice or them with a voice. I advocate on their behalf. It's a better way of putting it.
Yeah. And I know this kind of trending topic is this topic of DEI. And how is your firm changing its tactics and strategies in this era where a lot of places are getting rid of that? Are you seeing an uptick in the number of lawsuits, or I'm just curious to hear your observations?
Yeah, I'm curious too. I don't know that I have identified a trend one way or the other. And frankly, if I did today, that trend might be completely different a week from now or a month from now, certainly at the rate things are going. I haven't spotted one yet. Fundamentally, I go back to the same spot. I try to keep it simple. If an employee is somehow denied an employment benefit or terminated simply because of their protected class, you can't do that. And that is illegal. And if employees are in the hiring process are unfairly evaluated simply because of a protected class, you can't do that either. How all this shakes out with the existence of DEI policies and the abolishment of them by executive orders of who, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. A general broader question is with this, because you hear like high profile Olympic sexual assault, you have the Catholic Church, you have hazing. So is this all of this going to make just people like corporations and businesses very on the defensive, and they prevent it from happening beforehand, and they use this rhetoric to, is it just going to,
That it all the lawsuits that are now being discussed in the media actually lead to positive change. One of the best things I get to do is represent a child or a family of a child who has been sexually abused. I can't think of any better way to use a law degree than to help someone who went through such a horrific event. My This is a general feeling. I'm not going to say that this applies to every entity out there that could potentially be sued, but I think there are certain businesses that attract pedophiles, unfortunately. And it's literally true. There's a problem in Catholic churches because it and other churches, not just Catholic, because it drew in a certain segment of society that had that tendency to want to abuse a child. People who want to abuse a child become teachers for a reason. They have access to students. They become involved in youth sports organizations to provide themselves access to children. They become
Mhm.
Uber drivers to get access to people. And
Mhm.
so my point is, if you operate one of those businesses or institutions that puts your employees in contact with children, you need to do a really good job to make sure you are properly supervising that individual and that you have policies and procedures in effect to make sure that people will speak out and that red flags will be noticed and that kids will be kept safe.
Mhm.
So, from my perspective, when I sue, and not just me, because there's a lot of lawyers that, not a lot, but there's a segment of lawyers that focus on this area of the law. I'm hoping that my lawsuit leads to lasting change. So, on behalf of my individual client that I'm suing in that case, of course, I'm seeking a financial recovery. It's their form of justice. There's often a criminal component to this as well that I don't handle. But my job is to hold those institutions accountable for what they did wrong. And
Mhm.
I hope that that institution learns from their mistakes and institutes positive change that protects the next generation of society.
Mhm.
Again, I care for those cases a lot. I have 4 kids of my own. I want them to look back at some point and maybe when they're older and say, hey, my dad was actually trying to help other kids, because that's truly what I am trying to do.
Yeah. I know you've built a successful going from your mission down to the more to the business aspects. You've marketed your law firm very successfully indifferently. So what strategies have helped you build a successful law firm focused on high profile cases?
A lot of work, a lot of trial and error. Chris, I'm sure you hear that from a lot of people. If came in here and said we got it right the first time, I would be lying. Lawyers are classically bad at running businesses. And what my firm tries to do, and other firms try to do as well, is practice law well, but at the same time, own and operate your business well. And it doesn't necessarily coincide each and every time. Marketing is a different animal. How you market to people that suffer different types of wrongs, they're all different. How you market to people in different cities is different, let alone talk about crossing state lines. The legal implications of having a legal practice in multiple states, managing employees in different states and throughout in different countries, even, it's all a challenge. And I think I don't pretend to know everything. I think that's a mistake some business owners make, is you think you know the right answer. I seek outside help. I have consultants that help me operate. I have If I'm not good at marketing, for example, I have a marketing director just on the other side of that wall, and it's her job to say, hey, Brian, your idea is bad, you should try this instead. To show you another example of why I think outside help is so different. I operate a law firm that sues corporations for making employment mistakes all the time. I have an outside labor lawyer that I pay and consult with so that I don't make mistakes. And I know the law, but I still, to me, it's better to defer to outside consultants, outside experts to help you make individual decisions, marketing, legal, accounting, whatever it is, instead of trying to pretend like you know how to do it.
Yeah. And for the also doctors are very notorious for not running practices well. And so how do you decide when it's the right time to expand to a new market or state for solopreneurs, solo practitioners, lawyers, doctors, dentists, etc.?
Yeah, again, I'll speak in my area, which is law firms. I think that there is a trend in our country that will continue, at least I hope it does, because that's the direction I'm headed in, of national law firms. I think that certain firms will be favored when they have a national presence, because as a society, we're now not in one place, right? You and I are zooming right now in different states, and businesses operate in multiple different states. So firms that can place themselves in a variety of different markets throughout the United States, I think, have an advantage over those that are focused on a singular market. So when I look to expand, then the first I spend a lot of time vetting. I come up with a lot of ideas and I execute on very few of them. But I think you got to establish the need. Is there a need for what I do or what our firm does in that market? And then you have to evaluate your competitors to see, am I filling it? Am I filling a need? But is it, or am I going to fight tooth and nail with someone who's been there for decades and lose that fight? Right? That's not good. So, is there a need? What's my level of competition? And then, most importantly, how will I execute on that? If I'm going to go to some state that's across the country, I'm not barred there, for example. So I will have to hire lawyers in that other state that's able to handle those cases with some management oversight from our headquarter office and things like that. So, can you get the right resources and the right people in place to succeed? Those are my three criteria. What's the need? What's the level of competition? And can I staff up to actually handle cases if unsuccessful?
Interesting. And along the lines, because you're expanding across different states, and what are the regulatory challenges and the legal? Because I know, for example, doctors, you need a license in different states. How about for lawyers?
Same thing. You have to be licensed in the individual state you're practicing in. There are some states where it's easier to become licensed than others, but most of them require you to take the bar exam all over again. When I took the bar exam for the first time over 20 years ago, I never wanted to take it again, but it's becoming more and more common for lawyers to be licensed in multiple states. You there's that regulatory requirements, but everything's different, right? The law is different, the judges are different, the legal community is different, the regulations that apply, the laws that apply. Just because something's illegal in California doesn't make it illegal in Nevada, as an example. You have to tackle all of those issues. That's why there's a lot of planning and vetting that goes into, at least in my perspective, that decision before you just go.
Yeah. Where do you see artificial intelligence making an impact in the legal profession?
It's huge. Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. It's timely too. I spent yesterday afternoon being demoed an AI product that I was very interested in. I feel like I've probably demoed 20 different AI products specific to the legal field in the last 3 months. And I'm vetting them and acquiring a few of them on a trial basis to see which ones work best. What I've told my team of lawyers, because everybody I think is worried about AI is going to replace humans or AI is going to replace the need for accountants. What I tell my lawyers, in fact, as early as yesterday, is AI will never replace a lawyer, but lawyers that know how to use AI will replace lawyers that don't.
Mm,
That's my belief because what I have seen so far is that it maximizes efficiency. It can handle repeatable tasks that a lawyer or a paralegal or some other staff in a law firm does every day in a fraction of the amount of time it takes for the individual employee to do it. So why would you not want to take advantage of those? I know I do, but I'm very careful in how we select and make sure it's fully compliant with my legal obligations. And most importantly, AI is not a substitute for being a lawyer. Everything that our AI products prepare are then reviewed and checked by a lawyer to make sure that hallucinations, I think that's the right word, don't occur, right? Because what someone I remember listening to a speech of someone about chat GBT in a law firm, and they're like, be careful because chat GBT will always give you an answer. It may not be the right answer, but it doesn't know how to tell you it doesn't know. So it will give you an answer. So, again, I think you have to be careful, particularly what I do and in a lot of other industries, but you got to use it. I think it's not going to go away.
yeah. How can people find you and reach out to you and learn more from you and connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So easiest way is probably to go to our firm's website. It's GG, that's Greenberg Gross, but it's ggtriallaw.com. Our contact information is there. You'll see all of our different offices in different states, and my email address is on there as well. But for your listeners, it's bwilliams@ggtriallaw.com.
Excellent. Thanks so
Yeah,
much for insightful podcast and keep up the great work.
great. Thank you, Chris. It was great.